Hello and welcome back. It's so good to be with you today. I have a special guest, Kieve Huffman. I've known Kieve for several years, bumped into him at many conferences and had amazing, deep conversations about brand equity and cannabis. And it's always a wonderful conversation because, to be honest, in the cannabis space, it really is a brand new industry. And so whenever you come across an experienced brand manager who really understands not just brand equity and branding, but also branding in cannabis, is very exciting for me. So, Kieve, welcome to our program, and can't wait to talk with you about what it is you do and your thoughts about where we are in this industry. But first, tell us about your company, Engager and Plant Entrepreneurial Institute. To tell us a little bit about exactly is what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Dan. Yeah, and it's always a pleasure to run into you and your team at all these conferences. And we appreciate everything that you're doing to help support and educate the industry. So Engager is my brand development and accelerator group. So I've worked on over 60 different brand projects. I'm an owner of several brands, and I've launched brands throughout the Americas, throughout North America and South America. And so I help other cannabis brands bring their brands into other markets and also to develop their brands in the right way from the very start. And to your point earlier, we'll talk a little bit more about this. A lot of brands right now haven't been really developed the right way to really have a long-lasting opportunity, to succeed in the long run. But that's one side of what I do. And then the other side is a very new initiative, which actually is just recently launched, which is the Plant Entrepreneurial Institute. And what we have found is that there's a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners that, if you were in any other industry, let's say you want to start a SaaS business, you want to start an e-com business, there are online courses that you could take where you can go and learn from experienced operators who have been there, done that. Well, that doesn't really exist in cannabis. So we are putting together some courses and programs to help educate cannabis entrepreneurs. The first courses are focused primarily on brand development and brand acceleration, which is really my expertise, because I'm a big believer in, all ships rise with the rising tide, and we need to help educate, everyone that's coming through this industry, because as you know, Dan, it is so hard to start a business in any industry, and in this one in particular, you've already got those additional kind of hurdles and roadblocks that we are through our personalized services and Engager, as well as through our education, we're trying to help make it easier, as easy as it can be, considering all the challenges we have.
I'm always amazed by the people who are aspiring cannabis entrepreneurs, how little they might know about brand equity and some of the strange questions you get that you really wouldn't get in a more mature business. So it really is, you really are swimming upstream with people that are developing brands that might not even know who their target audience is. I mean, those are the types of questions you're sharing with me, that you ask brand managers, that they're not even sure who their target audience is. So how do you design a customer patient journey if you don't even know who your target is? So how do you help me understand how you swim upstream in such a new industry like that to be able to overcome some of that deficit in that knowledge gap, which is understandable why you want to educate, but how do you overcome those knowledge gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, it's a lot of education and patience. And having been in this industry now for 9 years, I've seen it all. And yes, it is challenging. I previously had an in-house agency at one of my former companies, and I think I was telling you before, the first question we would ask people when they walk in the door is like, "Who's your target audience?" And people would say, everyone, or people that smoke, or or whatever. It was never, or very very rarely was it beyond, more focused than that. So what we do is we walk people through a brand audit, and we have a very specific way of doing it that's targeted to the cannabis industry specifically. There's a lot of elements of a brand audit that apply to any brand, no matter what industry you are. But I'd say there's probably about 30% that is unique to the cannabis industry that you need to really be focused on to make sure that you don't make any missteps. So the approach is to really to try to be patient, to educate. And yes, what I've seen a lot in cannabis, as I'm sure you have, Dan, is that a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs are really good at something. Like maybe they're really good at cultivation, or they're really good at some sort of a manufacturing process, or they're really good at any number of other different things, but that doesn't mean they're good at understanding branding. And so sometimes it's getting these entrepreneurs to understand that it's okay to listen to other people and to get help in other areas. You don't, just because you're good in one thing doesn't mean you're going to be good in everything. And I think we see that a lot, right, in this industry, where a lot of these people just think that they know how to do it all. It's like, oh yeah, I know I'm great at branding. I've built brands before, but at the end of the day, a lot of them have built great products that have been successful, but they didn't really build great brands, and helping to teach them the difference. And a lot of that relates to the what you were talking about earlier, which is making sure that you've clearly identified who your customer is and who your target audience is. Mm-hmm. And making sure that every step of the way you are super serving them, you're delighting them, and that you have, through every single touch point, whether the touch point is through your packaging, your logos, to your marketing messages, to every aspect of talking, the more direct you can talk to your customers and your target audience, obviously the better that's going to be for you being able to really build a meaningful connection to your audience.
And that's the key word, is connection. I once heard a speaker talk about brand equity, and the ultimate compliment a brand could get is if someone tattoos it on their body. Harley Davidson being the best example, or Iron Man. If you're able to complete an Iron Man, you can put the Iron Man tattoo on your calf, but you're not allowed to do it unless you've completed it. And you think about that brand equity, and that's all based on experience and the customer journey. And that, yeah, sure, a motorcycle is about experience. Yeah, a triathlon is about experience, but at the end of the day, isn't that what we're all trying to do, is to create a brand experience, a brand journey, so we could ultimately get someone to tattoo our brand to their body?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I hadn't heard that one before, but I love that analogy, because you're right. I mean, look, if someone's willing to go through the pain and put in the permanence of a tattoo, then you've obviously developed a connection to that person in a deeply profound way. So yes, I absolutely, it's critically important that, look, I think, having built brands in other industries as well, what I see a lot of brands try to do in this industry is try to be all things to all people, right? And try not to, they don't want to offend any group, or they don't want to but to me, I think what's the strongest brands in the world have hyper focus on who their core target audience is, and have developed an experience around that, because that's really, at the end of the day, those become your biggest evangelists, right? That becomes your tribe, and that's your core. And then what happens is that you get the aspirational halo effect, right? Because there's all these people that want to be like these people, right? And so that's how you start to grow beyond that. But if you try to be all things to all people, then you end up meaning nothing to everyone, right? You really don't have a meaningful, right, connection. And so I think at the end of the day, kind of speaking about the experience, and I think this is true with the Iron Man community or Harley Davidson aficionados, is that people want to feel like they're part of a community, right? They want to feel part of something. And if this brand is deeply integrated into that overall communal experience, that's when you're successful.
Right. It's you think about cannabis and what are the opportunities to have that quote unquote experience. It can be that all the touch points are multiple at the dispensary, on the website, on the phone, which is what we do at CannabisBPO. And then obviously when you take the product home, you take it out of the package, you open it up, you consume it however you're going to consume it. Those are all experience touch points that contribute to brand equity. Are there any I'm missing? What I mean, it's and cannabis, I think, is also driven to experience as well, specifically because of the nature of the plant, of what it does. It's mind altering. It changes our views. So, isn't it a natural type product to feed into a brand experience?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that I really encourage brands to do more of. It's what we've done with a couple of the brands that I own are focused on music audiences. And so we take that experience directly to music festivals, to concerts, and it makes so much sense, right? Go to where your audience is, right? A lot of cannabis brands, when they think of experiential, they typically just go to cannabis specific events, whether it be a B2B or just a B2C event. Well, at the end of the day, most cannabis consumers, like, it's a part of their overall kind of, what they do. They don't necessarily just want to go to just cannabis specific events. So I think experiential at events, and it depends on who your audience is, right? If your audience are foodies, right? Or, then you want to be at these like tasting events, and you want to have, whatever it may be, go to where your audience is, because I do believe that being deeply integrated into the overall experiences, especially because, to your point, what this actual product is, it lends itself to enhancing these experiences. And so you want to be there. So yes, I think experiential is a critically important element that a lot of brands right now maybe aren't focusing enough on.
It's all about experience. It's my generation, and I think I speak for our generation. We joke that we acquire things and houses and cars and vacation homes, and the next generation, my kids' generation, they're not as interested in things. They're really interested in experiences. So from a brand perspective, that next generation that's coming up, when you talk about experience and how do you cement a brand experience, that next generation is even more likely to demand and require experiences that are going to drive brand equity, I think, more so than our generation even.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think even beyond that, I think what we're seeing with this younger generation, and I put my son into the same category as well, is that they have a pretty strong BS detector, right? And so the other thing that's important for brands is you have to be authentic, right? Because they can see through things very quickly. They're so used to being marketed to at this point, and they're very easily jaded. And if you make a misstep, if you're not on brand and true to the audience, every step of the way, then you're gonna lose out. And so, I think that's something that's also important, is that, making sure that you have this consistent messaging that goes throughout all the different touch points that you have, because all it takes is one misstep. So if someone calls like one of your call centers and isn't on brand for that brand, then that could ruin the entire experience for that person, for that brand, because it all has to tie together.
Right. Thinking about the brand experience, everybody thinks of Disney, and their tagline is, if you ever want to get something done at Disney and you're not happy with the way things are going, or you don't like the hotel room you got, or you didn't like the ticket package, all you have to say is, I'm not delighted. And they are trained within the entire Disney system to jump through every hoop to make sure you're delighted. And that's how they built their brand equity. Now, obviously, Disney is a theme park. Now they're entertainment, but at the theme park, it's all about experience. So I think, again, it illustrates that experience is what it's about. And one of the things that we preach, obviously, is when someone picks up the phone and they call a dispensary and they get a dispensary operator that's handling customers and also taking phone calls, that means the person that's waiting in line to see a bud tender and the person on the phone that's waiting to talk to them, neither of them are happy. You've pissed off two constituents in that experience process, because I'm sitting here having to wait because someone called the phone. So how do you, that's the big question, is how do you get a brand experience to scale? How do you do what Disney did to get people to buy into that, employees to buy into that delighted, I'm not delighted? Because anybody can do it at a small scale, but how do you do it at a big scale, other than hiring CannabisBPO to do your customer service, but some of the other aspects of the business, how do you do it at scale?
Well, it's interesting because I think in many ways for cannabis and specifically, we haven't found out yet how you scale cannabis brands, because no cannabis brands have truly scaled yet, right? I mean, other than, a small handful that are in multiple states and multiple countries, most brands haven't scaled, and it kind of points to some of the unique kind of challenges that we do have to deal with in this industry, right? Which are a lot of the legal restraints and just the regulatory constraints of, like, if your products are THC products, then obviously you can only market them and bring them to market, state by state and country by country, and have to, be very, you have to potentially have a completely different strategy, depending on, where you're launching this. And so, I think in a traditional, what I'm starting to focus more and more with the brands that I'm working with is coming up with a strategy that does focus on that scalable end game from the start, versus the sort of the challenges of trying to go state by state. And sometimes that means bringing out some products that maybe they're CBD products, maybe they're hemp products that have a larger opportunity to go, national, right? So that you can truly start to scale and create a national brand, because that's what we haven't quite seen yet. So I would say that
there's no playbook yet. In other words, we're writing the playbook as we talk.
Absolutely, right. And it's like, I mean, other than, maybe, I think you could count on one hand, the number of brands that might have, some sort of national brand recognition. Yeah, we truly are writing the book, the playbook today. And it's something that after 9 years in this industry, I'm getting very used to, because there's never been a rule book or playbook for anything that I've tried to do in this industry yet. You have to be comfortable kind of operating in those spaces. And those are some of the things that I try to help provide, whenever we're working with brand owners or entrepreneurs, is to help them navigate those waters, because they're different. It's a different landscape for cannabis than it is in any other industry that I've ever worked in.
I would say the biggest common mistake I see with brands is they're just not willing to let the reality of what it costs to develop a brand in terms of money. And people are kind of lying to themselves and saying, I got such a good product, it'll sell for you. It's so good. It's, nobody has a higher THC content or whatever it might be.
Everyone's got the best.
We've heard it all. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're in this industry, we're very good at lying to ourselves that we can build a brand without the proper resources and the proper attention. And you can't really necessarily do it on the cheap. And that, as a matter of fact, if you try and do it on the cheap, it hurts you. And you can actually set your brand back, a lot if you do it cheaply. Speak to that with us for a minute, if you will.
It is a challenge, and it's particularly even more challenging in today's environment, because so many of cannabis companies don't have access to growth capital right now, right? So even those that do understand the need to put more money into it don't have the means to be able to do so. So it's a tricky thing. But I would say when things were more flush, like maybe 5 years ago, even then, you're right, it was amazing how many times we'd get lowballed on, if we're going to create a brand, and people would say, well, I want to create a brand for X amount of money. And it's like, you would be laughed out of the room from a traditional agency in any other industry, right? You know, for the amount of money that you're willing to put into it. But look, I do think that there are some creative ways that you can get around not having to spend a lot of money. And I also do think that if you create a brand that is so meaningful to a core audience that you're really super serving that audience, then you can mitigate some of your brand expenses because your audience will become your ambassadors for you, your brand ambassadors for you. So like there's some ways around it, but I agree that I think people need to mentally get over like, yeah, we need to spend money on brands, but it's also that they don't really have the money right now, even if they wanted to spend it.
Right. You got to spend. I mean, you have to, if you're going to make investments, one of the things we preach is you have to make investments as something that you can measure the ROI, return on investment. And that's one of the things that, Cannabis BPO, we're very proud of doing that. If you spend $1 with us on customer service, we have very, very clear and distinct ways to give you a path to additional revenue that more than pays for that dollar. So it's not a cost center. And so often people think of marketing as a cost center, whereas there are lots of marketing initiatives out there that literally give you an immediate return on investment. You don't have to wait 6 years or 6 months. And that's, I think, what people get stuck in their head is, oh, God, I got to spend money and I'm not going to get that back for another, whatever. So talk to that a little bit. What are some of the things that brands can do that has quicker returns on investment, like call center, obviously?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, ROI is something I'm a data guy at the end of the day. I worked in the music industry where we, in digital music, and I poured over, spreadsheets on the regular. A little bit of a data geek, so I do preach if you're going to put money into. So there's really, kind of two different ways. You're kind of building your overall brand awareness, which is sort of that's the longer horizon spin. But I would focus more, particularly now, where the only ROI that you're going to be able to get if you're a THC brand is in your local market, is to focus on marketing and branding initiatives that, ultimately drive sales, right? And so there's any number of those, that you can, whether it's investing in SEO or investing more into some of these experiential marketing campaigns that, whether it's, patient appreciation days or bud tender training days, or, or if it's expanded out to other, events. The one thing that we always do at any experiential event is we always have a special offer that ties back to a point of sale. And it's sometimes difficult to connect those dots, but at least when they do get connected, we're able to measure it, right? Because we gave people a special offer code that would, so we know by following that code, right, that this was driven from this particular, marketing initiative. And then, yeah, I think in general, there are other ways that you can do things creatively through some different social media marketing initiatives as well as mobile marketing. Mobile marketing is a little bit of a moving target, but yeah. But again, it's measurable, right? So I think getting back to your point, it's like you want to focus on these things that and these initiatives that you can measure, so that you don't feel like you're just throwing money into something and betting on the come. Well, eventually it'll pay off. It's like, no, these things, like, you're going to be able to measure very quickly whether or not they're working, and if they're not working, then you can adjust and put your money elsewhere. Or I also encourage testing as well. Like, I see a lot of companies that just kind of put all their eggs into one basket or one creative or one marketing message, and coming from a more direct response, direct marketing background, it's like, God, the benefits of doing an A/B split, right? Or an ABC split of, like, because then you start to learn, oh, wait a minute, this creative is working better than this. Like, okay, let's start to focus and hone in on this creative, this message, this call to action, this offer is what people are more gravitating towards. And we're starting to see a little bit more of that in this industry, but for the most part, I think there's a little bit of a lack of sophistication around that.
Yeah, I would say that measurement is really key to everything. Just being able to, any initiative you put together needs to be measured, and that's one of the things that I think is kind of error number one that I see is they'll put an initiative out there and they really have no mechanism to measure if it was successful, like a coupon program to measure if they actually led to sales. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of that also, and it's especially important for a nascent industry that's brand new. That, as you pointed out, we really don't know. So data is important. How do you gather data? You have to have programs out there that gather data. So
that does get into some of the other challenging, aspects when you're a brand, is that, without having a direct relationship to the end consumer, sometimes collecting that point of sale data can be a little challenging because, there isn't necessarily, a consistent and reliable, it's like the garbage in, garbage out. Like if you've got a store, a retail partner that's not really diligent about the system that they use to, record sales and information and the offers, it can be a little bit more challenging than in other industries. But I do feel that things are starting to evolve, and then you do have those services like that provide a bit more, like the headsets of the world, where you can get a little bit more of the macro story.
Well, there's data coming out that gives you micro data as well. If you're a dispensary, New Frontier Data has a great tool set that you can get data that will rock your socks as a retail operator to really help you figure out what direction you want to go. So those tools are starting to evolve and starting to get really sophisticated. The uptake has not been nearly what I would think they would be, mainly because most people are resource constrained still. If money starts to come in again, I think we'll start to see some of those services take off as the business grows again. Because right now we're in a little bit of a flat line until the uncertainty of legislation hopefully surprises us in the next few months and opens commerce up. So Kieve, it's been a real pleasure. I need to wrap up, but I could talk all day about this stuff. This is stuff that really gets my temperature up because it's so important. And it's a cornerstone of what we do at CannabisBPO is about that one-to-one relationship in marketing, and that the marketing in the cannabis industry is one that needs people like you and needs people like CannabisBPO as well. So we're always thrilled to have these conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on, Dan, and anyone that wants to connect with me, please go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have further on anything related to cannabis brand building.
Well, thanks.